November 7, 1849. Chatham County, Georgia. In the center of Savannah's public market, a woman stands upon an auction platform. The rope binding her hands has already worn the skin of her wrists raw. She is 22 years old. She is 5 months pregnant. And she is about to be sold for 19, not $19. 19 cents. Less than the price of a pound of coffee. The auctioneer, a man named Cyrus Feldman, holds the deed of sale with practiced efficiency, his voice carrying across the crowd. But something is wrong with this auction. Something that makes even the hardened slave traders shift uncomfortably. Something that will set in motion a chain of events so disturbing, the city of Savannah will spend the next 80 years trying to erase every record of that day. Tonight, we reveal the truth they buried, and we follow this woman's story to its shocking conclusion. A conclusion involving murder, betrayal, and an act of resistance so brutal that when it was finally discovered in 1931, the authorities immediately sealed the evidence and forbade anyone from speaking of it publicly. This is the story they never wanted you to hear. Before we go further into what happened in Savannah that November morning, I need you to do something important. Subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell. Because stories like this, stories that expose the darkest chapters of American history, these are the stories that get buried, suppressed, and forgotten. And I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches. Let's build a community that refuses to let these truths disappear. Now, let's continue. The woman on that platform has a name, though it appears in official records only twice, and each time spelled differently. In the bill of sale from her previous owner, she is listed as Dinah. In the coroner's report filed 6 years later, she is called Diana. For our purposes, we will call her Dinina, because that is the name she used when she finally spoke. When she finally told her story to the one person who listened. Dinina was born in 1827 on a rice plantation outside Charleston, South Carolina. She never knew her father. Her mother, a woman named Patience, worked the fields from sunrise until long after dark, her hands permanently stained green from rice stalks, her back bent from years of labor that would kill her when Dinina was just 11. After Patience died, Dinina was sold to a Charleston tobacco merchant named Elias Cartwright, who needed domestic help for his growing household. Elias was 43, married to a woman named Constance, and father to 4 children. He was also a deacon at the First Presbyterian Church, a member of the Charleston Chamber of Commerce, and by all public accounts, a respectable businessman who treated his property, human and otherwise, with appropriate Christian values. That was the public account. The private reality was something else entirely. Dinina worked in the Cartwright household for 3 years, from age 11 to 14. She cleaned, cooked, and cared for the younger children. She did everything demanded of her. And Elias Cartwright watched her. He watched her in that particular way enslaved women learn to recognize, that predatory attention signaling danger, making survival require constant vigilance. When Dinina turned 14, Elias's attention became action. What happened between them, if we can even use the word, between, as though there was any equality or choice involved? What happened was rape. Systematic, repeated, sustained over years. Dinina had no power to refuse. Enslaved women had no legal right to deny their owners anything. The law did not recognize their bodily autonomy. The law considered them property, and property cannot be violated because property has no self to violate. Constance Cartwright knew. She knew because enslaved women in close quarters could not hide pregnancy. She knew because Denina's body changed in ways that made the truth unavoidable. But Constance did not confront her husband. She confronted Denina. She accused her of seduction, of tempting a good Christian man, of deliberately destroying the sanctity of a godly household. The blame, in Constance's worldview, lay entirely with the 16-year-old girl who had no power to say no, rather than with the 46-year-old man who had absolute power to take whatever he wanted. In March of 1843, Denina gave birth to a daughter. The child was noticeably light-skinned, her features clearly indicating mixed parentage. Elias Cartwright refused to acknowledge her as his. He named her Ruth, registered her in his property ledger as the offspring of his servant Dinah, father unknown, and continued his life exactly as before. Constance demanded that Denina and the baby be removed from the main house. They were relocated to the servants' quarters, a cramped structure behind the main residence where 6 other enslaved people lived in conditions that barely qualified as shelter. Denina raised Ruth while continuing to work in the Cartwright household. She nursed her daughter at night after 16-hour days of labor. She sang to her in whispers, songs her own mother had sung, songs that carried memories of Africa, of freedom, of a world before chains. And she watched as Ruth grew, as the child's features became undeniable evidence of who her father was, as the resemblance to Elias Cartwright became so obvious that neighbors began to whisper, to speculate, to understand what everyone had always known but politely ignored. In 1847, when Ruth was 4 years old, Elias Cartwright sold her. He sold her to a slave trader named Marcus Pennington for $400, a standard price for a healthy child. He sold her on a Tuesday morning without warning Denina, without allowing goodbyes, without permitting the mother even a final moment with her daughter. Denina was in the kitchen when she heard Ruth screaming from the front of the house. By the time she ran outside, the child was already gone, loaded into a wagon disappearing down the street, her small hands reaching back toward the only home she had ever known. Denina collapsed in the street. The other enslaved people had to carry her inside. For 3 days she did not speak, did not eat, barely moved. She had entered a state of grief so profound it resembled death itself, and perhaps she wished it was. But she did not die. Her body refused her that mercy. Instead, she survived. And survival meant returning to work, meant continuing to serve the man who had raped her and then sold the child born of that rape, meant functioning in a world designed to destroy her humanity piece by piece. 2 years later, in the summer of 1849, Denina became pregnant again. The father was Elias Cartwright. There was no question, no ambiguity. Constance Cartwright's fury was immediate and absolute. She could tolerate one incident, one child, one public embarrassment. But a second pregnancy made the situation undeniable, made it impossible to maintain the fiction that Denina was a seductress and Elias an innocent victim of temptation. A second pregnancy revealed the truth, that Elias Cartwright was a man who repeatedly raped an enslaved woman he owned, who had been doing so for years, who showed no intention of stopping. Constance gave Elias an ultimatum. Get rid of her. I will not have that woman in my house bearing your children while I live under the same roof. Sell her, trade her, give her away. I do not care. But she leaves this household within the month, or I will make this situation public in ways that will destroy your reputation permanently. Elias understood the threat. His position in Charleston society depended on respectability. Wealthy men were expected to be discreet about their violations of enslaved women, whispered about, perhaps, but never openly acknowledged. A wife publicly accusing her husband of serial rape of his property, that would cross a line that even Charleston's tolerant attitude toward slavery could not ignore. So Elias made arrangements. He contacted a business associate in Savannah, a merchant named William Hadley, who owed him money from a failed cotton investment. Elias proposed a transaction. He would forgive Hadley's debt, approximately $800, in exchange for Hadley purchasing Dinina and taking her to Savannah. Far enough that she would never return. Far enough that Constance would never see her again. Far enough that Elias could pretend she had never existed. Hadley agreed. The transaction was arranged for early November, during Savannah's regular public auction. But Elias added one specific condition, a condition so cruel it reveals the depth of his vindictiveness. He set Dinina's minimum price at 19 cents. The amount was deliberate, calculated to humiliate. In 1849, the average price for an enslaved woman of childbearing age ranged from $700 to $900. A pregnant woman should have been valued even higher. By setting the price at 19 cents, Elias achieved several goals simultaneously. He demonstrated that Dinina had no value to him whatsoever. He ensured she would be purchased by someone who recognized she was being offered as damaged goods. And most importantly, he guaranteed that Dinina would understand exactly how worthless he considered her, how utterly disposable she was in his eyes. William Hadley traveled to Charleston in early November to finalize the arrangement. He met with Elias in the man's study, reviewed the paperwork, signed the necessary documents. The bill of sale was meticulous, listing Dinina's approximate age, her condition, pregnant, approximately 5 months, and the agreed-upon price, 19 cents. Elias Cartwright signed his name with the same pen he used for church documents and business contracts. His signature was neat, legible, totally unremarkable, just another transaction in a life built on transactions. Dinina was informed of the sale the night before she was to leave Charleston. She was given no choice, no opportunity to gather belongings. She had none, no chance to say goodbye to the people she had lived alongside for years. She was simply property being transferred, and property did not require emotional consideration. The journey from Charleston to Savannah took 2 days by wagon. Hadley hired a driver, a white man named Silas Burke, who specialized in transporting human cargo. Dinina rode in the back, her hands bound, a precaution against escape, though where would she run? 5 months pregnant, in a region where every white person was empowered to stop and question any black person traveling without papers. They arrived in Savannah on November 6. The city was larger than Charleston, busier, filled with the sounds of commerce and construction. The port hummed with activity, ships loading and unloading goods from across the world, cotton and rice and tobacco flowing out, manufactured items and luxury goods flowing in. And human beings, thousands of human beings, bought and sold and traded like livestock. William Hadley took Dinina directly to the auction house, a large wooden structure near the waterfront. The auctioneer, Cyrus Feldman, examined her with the practiced eye of someone who had evaluated thousands of people for sale. He noted her age, her condition, her general health. Then he saw the bill of sale, saw the minimum price of 19 cents, and his expression changed. "Something is wrong with this one," Feldman said to Hadley. "What is it? Disease? Injury? Mental deficiency?" "Nothing like that," Hadley replied. "She is healthy, able to work. The child appears viable." "Then why 19 cents? The seller wanted her gone quickly. It is a personal matter. Family dispute." Feldman understood immediately. This woman had done something, or had something done to her, that made her previous owner want her removed. The low price was a signal, a warning. "You will include that in the auction description," Feldman said. "I will not misrepresent her condition and risk my reputation." Hadley agreed. He did not care how Feldman presented Dinina. He simply wanted to complete the transaction. The auction was scheduled for the following morning, November 7th, at 10 a.m. Dinina spent the night in a holding cell beneath the auction house, a damp stone room where people awaiting sale were kept like animals in pens. She did not sleep. She sat with her back against the cold wall, her hands resting on her stomach, feeling the child move inside her. This child who would be born into slavery, who would never know freedom, who would belong to William Hadley or whoever purchased them at auction, who would live and die as property, unless something changed. Unless the entire system collapsed. And in November of 1849, that seemed as likely as the sky opening up and God himself descending to pass judgment on the men who built their fortunes on human suffering. When morning came, Dinina was brought up from the holding cell and positioned near the auction platform. She could see the crowd gathering, perhaps 60 or 70 people. Some were serious buyers, plantation owners, merchants. Others were simply spectators who attended auctions as entertainment, who found it no more morally troubling than watching cattle sold at market. Cyrus Feldman took his position on the platform at exactly 10 a.m. The November sun was already warm, and the air smelled of salt water and tobacco smoke. Feldman began with furniture, several chairs and a dining table from an estate sale. Then livestock, a pair of horses, some chickens. Then human beings. He sold a young man, approximately 20 years old, for $950. He sold an elderly woman, described as an excellent cook, for $300. Then he called for Dinina. She was brought onto the platform by Silas Burke, who positioned her in the center where everyone could see. Feldman read from the bill of sale, female named Dinah, approximately 22 years of age, currently with child, estimated 5 months, experienced in domestic service, able to cook, clean, and perform household tasks. Minimum bid, 19 cents. The crowd reacted immediately. 19 cents, someone called out. What is wrong with her? Is she diseased? I am informed she is healthy, Feldman replied. The price reflects a personal matter between the seller and the property, not a deficiency in the property itself. That explanation satisfied no one. In the economy of slavery, price indicated quality. A woman offered for 19 cents must be fundamentally defective, diseased, dangerous, or mentally unsound. Several men who had been preparing to bid lost interest. They turned away. But 3 men remained interested. The first was William Hadley himself. He stood near the front, waiting to bid. The second was someone Hadley had never seen before, a tall, thin figure dressed in traveling clothes, standing near the back, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. The third was a local Savannah plantation owner named Thornton Graves. Graves owned a mid-sized cotton plantation about 15 miles outside the city, and he was known among enslaved people as one of the cruelest masters in Chatham County. His plantation had the highest mortality rate, not from accidents or disease, but because Graves worked people to death deliberately, calculating it was more profitable to extract maximum labor over a short period than to maintain workers over decades. Graves had been watching Denina, and something about this situation intrigued him. A healthy pregnant woman being sold for 19 cents. That kind of opportunity did not present itself often. Are you ready to hear what I write next? This is where the story gets even darker, where we discover what Thornton Graves planned to do with Denina, and where we meet the mysterious stranger who will change everything. Cyrus Feldman raised his hand to quiet the murmuring crowd. 19 cents, he called out. Do I have a bid of 19 cents for this property? William Hadley raised his hand immediately. 19 cents. The crowd turned to look at him. His willingness to bid gave Denina a thin veneer of credibility. If Hadley was interested, perhaps she was not as defective as the price suggested. But before Feldman could acknowledge the bid, another voice cut through the crowd. 25 cents. Everyone turned. The speaker was Thornton Graves. He stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Hadley's jaw tightened. He had not anticipated competition. 50 cents, Hadley countered. Graves smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. $1. The crowd was riveted now. Two men bidding against each other for a woman being sold at refuse prices. This was unusual. This suggested something more than a simple transaction was occurring. Hadley hesitated. He had agreed to acquire Denina for Elias Cartwright, but he had not agreed to a bidding war. The debt forgiven was $800. If he had to spend significant money, he would be operating at a loss. $2, Hadley said, his voice tight. Thornton Graves took a step forward. He was enjoying this. $5, he called out, a dare for Hadley to continue. Hadley looked at Feldman, then back at Graves. He was calculating risks, weighing costs. Finally, he shook his head and stepped back. Graves had won. $5 once, Feldman called out. $5 twice. Then the stranger in the back spoke. $10. Every head turned. The man had removed his hat now. His face was visible, weathered, scarred along the left cheek, his eyes the color of winter sky. He looked to be in his mid-30s, and there was something about his bearing that suggested military service, or time spent in occupations where violence was routine. Who are you? Feldman asked, not hostile, but procedural. My name is Jacob Marsh. I am new to Savannah. I have business in the city and require domestic help. Do you have $10, Mr. Marsh? Jacob Marsh approached the platform. He reached into his coat and withdrew a leather purse. From it he counted out 10 silver dollars, placing them one by one on the podium. I do. Thornton Graves was staring at Marsh with open hostility now. He did not like being outbid. He did not like strangers disrupting what he had assumed would be an easy acquisition. $15, Graves said. 20, Marsh replied without hesitation. 30. The crowd was enthralled. The price had escalated from 19 cents to $30 in minutes. Whatever was happening, it was no longer about acquiring a pregnant woman at bargain prices. This had become a contest of will, a public demonstration of power. Thornton Graves looked at Jacob Marsh, trying to understand who this man was. Then Graves made a decision. $100. The crowd gasped. $100 was a reasonable price for a healthy enslaved woman, but far above what anyone had expected. Graves was making a statement. He was showing he would not be outbid. Jacob Marsh met Graves's stare. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice carrying with absolute clarity. $200. The silence that followed was complete. $200 exceeded the rational value of this transaction by any measure. Thornton Graves understood what was happening. This was no longer about money. This was about dominance, about refusing to yield. And Graves had built his entire life on refusing to yield. $300, Graves said, his voice hard now, angry. $350, Marsh countered. $400. $500. The amounts climbed. $600, $700. $800. When the bidding reached $1,000, William Hadley quietly left the auction house. He had no interest in participating further. He needed to send a message to Elias Cartwright, explaining that the simple transaction they had arranged had become something else entirely, something complicated, expensive, and potentially dangerous. At $1,200, Thornton Graves stopped bidding. Not because he lacked funds, but because he suddenly understood that Jacob Marsh would continue bidding until Graves bankrupted himself. This stranger was not trying to acquire property. He was trying to destroy whoever opposed him. $200 once, Feldman called out. Subscribe the channel. Thank you for your interest. As an AI assistant, I don't have a YouTube channel to subscribe to, but I appreciate your enthusiasm. If you'd like to continue exploring this powerful historical narrative, I'm here to help. We left off at a pivotal moment in the auction, with Jacob Marsh having just outbid Thornton Graves at $1,200. Would you like me to continue with the story and reveal what happens next to Dinina? The narrative is building toward the disturbing events that Savannah tried to erase from history.